Today is Wednesday, March the 9th, 2011. I'm Matthew T.G.
I'm Heath Mullican.
I'm Steve Stanley.
And I'm Tony Casey. Welcome to the Techology Show, a weekly podcast featuring technology, theology, and everything in between. The world's only user-antagonistic podcast. This is episode 97.
Woohoo!
It's great to have Steve back in the studio after a bit of a hiatus. Now, Steve said that he was bringing a surprise into the studio. We're going to get to that later. He did bring it with, and so we're not going to say anything right now because we have on the Skype line today our guest, Dr. Karl Eastlack. Let me tell you a little bit about him. He was raised in a Wesleyan pastor's home in southern New Jersey. He did his undergrad at Houghton College, has a master's degree from Indiana Wesleyan University. After college, he worked for 6 years with Youth for Christ. In 1982, he started his pastoral ministry, where he lasted for 27 years, 22 of those at Eastern Hills Wesleyan Church in suburban Buffalo, New York. When he got there were 19 attendees. It grew to more than 2,500. He helped the congregation through several building projects, led that, and then ultimately a full relocation of the church campus. Caring for the whole person spiritually and physically became a passion of the congregation. While there, Karl also started a daily radio broadcast called Today's Encouraging Word and authored a book of the same title. In the spring of 2009, Karl was appointed as the president and CEO of World Hope International. He's following the founder, Dr. Joanne Lyon. Most important, he is married to his lovely wife, Anita. They have been blessed with 3 wonderful children, and I understand, Karl, that you and your wife are also grandparents. Good morning and welcome.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you there. No. I'm now granddaddy.
Yes, so say it again.
I'm now a granddaddy.
Yeah, I hear the grandparenting thing's a pretty good gig.
Oh, man. You know, you have all the joy and none of the responsibility. It's a great way to go.
Well, it is just a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Yes, it is.
Again, you are the CEO of World Hope International. Why don't you begin by just describing that organization for people that may not know or are aware of World Hope International?
Yeah, World Hope is a relief and development organization, mostly development work that we do, and we can get into a dialogue as to what's the difference between relief and development. But we work with vulnerable and exploited communities and individuals around the world, mostly women and children in 18 different countries around the world, to help alleviate poverty, suffering, injustice issues that we work with. And we were founded back in 1996, so we're a 15-year-old organization, and you're correct, I'm following the founder, Dr. Joanne Lyon, who is a real legend in the development, the faith-based development world, and I'm very honored to have my name associated with this organization.
Well, and for Joanne, I mean, this organization started in her heart.
And in her house.
In her house out in Missouri, that's right.
Yeah.
Dr. Karl, you were at Eastern Hills for 22 years, and first of all, it's just amazing. You guys basically grew over 100 people a year while you were there. So tell us, how did you transition from that very successful ministry to being the CEO of World Hope International?
And maybe I'm not the one to ask that. Maybe it's the people that I work with that might want to ask, has he done the transition yet? I think that when I was interviewed for the position, they had called to ask if I'd be willing to interview, and I said I don't think so. I'm very, very happy where I am with what I'm doing as pastoring. And they called back and they said, we really don't think we're missing God on this conversation, and would you be willing to at least come for the interview? And the dialogue surrounded some of the passions that a pastor of the kind of church that Eastern Hills is in suburban Buffalo, which is a very world-changing kind of a congregation. The last thing they are is very locally driven. They understand their place in the suburban Buffalo area and do a great job at that, but they understand their place in the world. And we know that when we were as large as we were, that the old saying, to whom much is given, much is required. We began to ask God many years ago, Lord, what do you want us to do in your world? And because of that, we started connecting with organizations, including World Hope International. Wow. So I brought some of that to the table when I came to World Hope, just an understanding of the bridging between the North American church and people around the world and the needs that are out there. Also, you don't go from 19 people to over 2,500 folks without having some sense of organization and leadership and teamwork and all of those things that any organization needs. So I've been privileged to be able to bring those skills to bear here at the organizational headquarters, which is in suburban Washington, D.C.
Let me just say to our listeners in the chat room, if you have questions for Karl, please post those in the chat room. Heath is watching that, and we'll try to get those up. I noticed in the most current issue of World Hope Live that you are featuring village partnerships. Could you explain those a little bit? And we have pastors who are listening and lay people. So tell what it is and how they can get involved with this.
Sure. In my opinion, just being a pastor myself, I understand what's going on in the modern church, if you will, the church currently in North America, especially churches that have plenty of young people and young driven, if you will, the 20s and 30s. They're beginning to say, what can we do around the world? They're beginning to say, how do we not just get people ready for eternity, but how do we get them ready to face tomorrow in their life?
Wow.
And the churches that are responding to that age group are the churches that are asking those questions. And so organizations like us and World Vision, there are many organizations out there that offer kind of linkages between the North American church and people around the world. What World Hope does is we have a program, an initiative called Village Partnerships. We're in different countries in Africa with that right now. We're actually considering what it'll mean in the future to expand to Haiti and to Cambodia, some of the other countries that we're in. But what they do is that it takes a North American church, and you're not helping World Hope accomplish its mission. World Hope is helping you accomplish your mission.
Wow.
And your love for the world.
Nice.
And this is what we offer. It's a 3-year commitment that a North American church makes. And in those 3 years, we do all kinds of wonderful things, from economic development for each family in the village to helping with their school system. And one of the tragedies in many countries of the world is that in most countries of the world, the schools at least from junior high up are tuition-based.
Yeah.
And it's real tragedy to sit in a village in the early mornings and watching about a third of the kids walking to school while the rest of the kids sit on the front step of their little hut watching and longing for the day when so we engage the children, getting them into school through child sponsorships. We drill wells in the communities that don't have clean water. So all of these things happen. And then to me, the capstone is to engage that North American church with the church in that village. And they become a mentoring kind of a big brother to that church. Many of the pastors have had very little training. Many of them can't read. And so just to learn the Bible stories and learn how to communicate well, learn how to be a good counselor, because many pastors in these villages have to sit with folks and walk them through difficulties of life, but they've never been trained to that. Yeah. So it gives the pastoral staff and the congregants from the North American church an opportunity to come alongside for a 3-year period and to create this wonderful relationship to help build that church up, because long after we're gone and long after that North American church is done in that village, that local church stays and is the presence of Christ in that community. And so we try to build up as best we can that local church and give them a great shot at being the hands and feet and voice of Jesus in their community.
What's the best way for churches to get involved with this? Just go to the website?
Yeah, they can go to worldhope.org and check more of what it is to establish a village partnership through World Hope. And my email, I'd love to receive questions about this. It's just my name, Karl Eastlack with a K, Karl Eastlack at worldhope.net. And I can answer questions, and we have church partnership folks that work out of our offices here that can help you along the way. But I just love, being a pastor, I just love connecting the heart of North American Christians to the world. And there's nothing quite better than it. When you go on I don't know if you guys have ever been on a short-term trip, but there's really nothing better. You come home and your heart is broken. It's under your skin, and it stays with you.
Yeah, very much so.
Now, could a district also get involved in that, in sponsoring a village?
Sure. A number of churches can go together and to cover the cost and to send missions teams if they want in all kinds of ways. So it doesn't have to be just one church that would cover a village.
Dr. Eastlack, not long after you took over World Hope, we had the terrible earthquake in Haiti, and World Hope has been there from the very beginning and was in Haiti before the earthquake, especially since the earthquake. Can you give us just an update of how things are going, and what are some of the present initiatives that are underway to continue rebuilding Haiti?
Yeah, I had never been to Haiti before until October of '09, so that was 3 months before the earthquake. I took my daughter with me, my teenage daughter. We adopted her when she was a baby. She's Haitian American, and we adopted her when she was a little 4-month-old cutie, and she's now getting ready to graduate from high school and go to college. But I took her down with me, and we spent several days down there running around the country and meeting up with families, especially doing a lot of work with children in Haiti. And I came home very frustrated, very discouraged after having visited the country, realizing that according to the United Nations, after 30 years of pouring billions of dollars, government dollars as well as private donor dollars, into that country, they are statistically worse in every category than they were 30 years ago. I mean, money, the old saying, money is not the complete answer, is really true. There's something missing there. And I came home very frustrated, with my heart really stirred, and I began to talk with other CEOs of development organizations about what could be done. And then the earthquake hit. My dad used to tell me that it's hard to fall out of bed when you're sleeping on the floor. And in Haiti, they somehow fell off the floor. And that poor country just went from tragic to devastated. So I was down just within a few days of the earthquake. I was down there and walking around, stepping over and around the dead bodies in the streets that we all saw on CNN, and trying to hold back my tears. I just wanted to cry all day long while I was down there, and looking at 3 city blocks of buildings, and seeing complete, I mean, like you've never seen before, like World War II bombed out towns, and it was just devastating. And standing in front of a nursing school where we knew that there were 75 nurses in class when their building came down. And I'm standing in front of this entombment, if you will, and realizing that all of the families had just lost loved ones in there. So I got down there. At the time, we had 105 staff that worked for World Hope, and we had a pretty good footprint across the country, and God spared the lives of all of our staff in Haiti, and I was so grateful for that. But I got them together and said, the Lord has spared your life for a purpose. Your country now needs you, and God needs you. So we got ourselves together and got ourselves working. We signed on with the UN because they were going to start coordinating the efforts. Right now, there are almost 10,000 NGOs, organizations in Haiti. They all rushed in, and all of a sudden you had everybody doing all kinds of stuff, and there wasn't much coordination of effort. And so we were all stepping over and often duplicating in the more intense areas, but ignoring a lot of the areas in the outlying. So we signed on with the UN coordination efforts, and they assigned us 10 different areas, regions that we were going to be working in. And the initial round was, of course, food, water, medicine, and tents, things like that for people to live in, latrines. So you think a lot of the health issues that came about just because of with people living in close quarters, and also the surgeries, the immediate surgeries that had to happen. So we sent down all kinds of medical teams. The kids, there were 1,400 schools destroyed at the earthquake, and so all of a sudden, thousands of kids have nothing to do all day long. So World Hope sent down teams, and we created day camps from 8 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon, kind of like vacation Bible school camps, to give the kids something to do, to spend their day and maybe take their mind off of some of the misery that they were facing. We set up several medical clinics, and it was just real tragic. I visited some, especially in Cité Soleil, which is a suburb of Port-au-Prince. It's the poorest part of Port-au-Prince, and sitting with people, seeing hundreds lined up, and they would come and they would get there about 7 in the morning. They would wait all day while we worked through, one at a time, dealing with the needs that they had. And many times we couldn't get to them all that day, so they would come back the next morning and just sit there. We triaged to get the most important ones up front. And so that was, and water, you can only last so long without clean water. Right. And so trying to get the distribution of water and food goods. And I was so proud of American Christians during those first couple of months. It was a real thrill to watch how Christians can stand up and do something good for another culture. And we were very honored to be kind of that linkage between North American Christians and Haitians. Now that's shifted away. We're no longer heavily invested in just distributing water and food and things like that, because the UN has all great systems now up and running. we're focusing now on the reconstruction work, helping to rebuild schools. We've been assigned several schools to rebuild, medical clinics, houses that we're rebuilding. We have a company down there that we started that makes a block in order to build these new buildings, and we're putting Haitians to work. Our preference is we'll send down construction teams from American churches because they want to get in and they want to help. But we'd prefer the North American churches send that money instead of the teams, because it takes about $1,500 if you wanted to get down, to give an example. But for that $1,500, I could hire 20 Haitians for 2 months full time.
Wow!
So I'm putting Haitians to work. I'm getting money into their economy rather than American money that stays up here. And so we'll send down some of the experts. But just for the hammer swingers, we'd much prefer to hire Haitians and get them back to work again.
Now, Dr. Eastlack, you said, you talked about the previous 30 years and the ineffectiveness that had been happening in Haiti. How do we make sure organizations like World Hope, how do we make sure that as we're rebuilding Haiti, we don't just rebuild them back to where they were before the earthquake, that we take them to where they really need to be to build that country up?
Right. And a lot of it has to, you have a welfare mindset. And back during the Clinton administration, the Clinton administration really took on that mindset here in North America, and it seemed to have worked to challenge that mindset, to get people away from that incredible dependency. Well, Haiti is completely a welfare-driven country. And we did it to them. I mean, all of us that thought, let's go in and let's give them all their food. Let's give them, every time you give bags of rice, to give an example, and you think, let's be generous. Let's send down grain. Let's send down rice. Every time you do that for non-emergency. So during the earthquake, it was an emergency. But now, if we continue to do that, you're putting local rice farmers out of business. Wow. They can't compete with free. So nobody's going to go to the market, and so just that's the difference between relief and development work, and why relief work that lasts for a long time actually damages the very group of people you were thinking you were going to help. There's a good book, if you ever want to read it, called "When Helping Hurts," and that this author gets at some of those. The compassionate heart doesn't always do the smartest thing that really helps the people in the long haul. So I think that paying attention to that and helping the people to get their own jobs. So World Hope, as well as other organizations, are starting businesses. We're going to be starting tilapia farms throughout the country, and give people a chance to earn their own living and then sell the fish at market and in local restaurants. That's their favorite fish down there in Haiti. So there's a lot of ways that you create an economy, if you will. A lot of it has to do with helping to create a middle class. And so that's one of our goals.
Yeah, one of the things that, as I was there, that I was just told over and over again and observed over and over again was how it's so hard to raise up local leaders to oversee programs. A lot of people want titles and positions. I even saw that with some of the pastoral staff, the Haitian pastoral staff. That desire the position for the title and the social acclaim, I guess, that they would get that comes along with it. But actually getting people that are self-sacrificing leaders who are willing to, for the betterment of their community, of their church, and all that, to train them and to help people understand what that means is such a difficult barrier. I mean, the hospital that we have there on Loganov Island, they're trying to raise up local clinics in many of the outlying villages because it takes so long to get to the hospital, and how to get people to oversee that. And just reiterated over and over again through all of these things was we have to have local people that are going to actually take the reins of these things and move. And it's how do we overcome that obstacle?
Sure, and that's often difficult to do. In Africa, it's called the big man syndrome. You get the title, all of a sudden you throw your weight around, and you're just living out power rather than living out grace in the communities. We even see that in Haiti. I mean, in my opinion, one of the worst things that could happen right now is for their government to get back up and running again fully, because they, in my opinion, were part of the problem.
Yeah.
We have, to give just a small example, we have hundreds of products sitting at the port in Port-au-Prince.
Yeah, in customs, right?
For 8 months, 10 months.
Yeah.
And we can't get them out of customs
Right.
because the port directors, they, first of all, a lot of them want bribes, and World Hope doesn't bribe anyone. And so these things will sit. And I've sat with the director of the port, and I'll sit there and I'll say, sir, these are for your people. We're not going to sell these. We're not going to, these are for your people. That we have beds that we want. We have hundreds and hundreds of beds waiting to get out to people. And they're still sitting there. They've been sitting there since last May.
No.
And so I think it's a power trip the guys get on. I'm not sure how else to explain it, but you're right. So finding good quality people. Now our staff in Haiti are all Haitians. We have 2 Americans who volunteered to go down to help coordinate all of our teams, the Hope Corps teams that we send down. But all of our staff in country, including our country director, are Haitian men and women. They are wonderful. I just feel like we got the cream of the crop down there. They love their country. They're dedicated to service, not to power. They understand. Get on your knees and wash people's feet. They understand that concept.
I certainly didn't say that to insinuate, that there are no people like that. There certainly are.
But,
I mean, they're
hard to
some,
find.
Yeah, there are some high quality people. I mean, guys like Karl Eastlack. I'm just I'm so impressed by him. I mean, a guy who grows up in Haiti, has the chance to get away from all of that, and yet is choosing to be back. It makes me smile. I love it.
You actually answered.
Too often they get educated and they leave the country.
Right.
Because, I mean, who wouldn't? They leave the country for a better life in North America or in Europe or something like that, and they don't go back because many people feel that Haiti's a lost cause. And I just don't believe that. I just feel like, no, something's got to be broken. There's a spirit of welfare. There's just a difficulty that maybe has to get broken there, but I haven't written off Haiti yet personally.
Yeah,
you actually answered one of the questions from the chat room. They were just asking, had you faced any opposition with local leaders as far as you guys want to go in and build stuff and work and it sounds like with some of this stuff at the port that you have met some resistance.
But we haven't in the towns and cities where we're doing the rebuilding.
Right.
They've opened their arms to us. And in Leogan, which was the epicenter city where the earthquake hit, the mayor has just open arms to us. We're just thrilled to be able to partner with him. And he knows that he and his people will benefit directly. I just think that the farther removed you get from the grassroots of your country, the more personal you get. And it becomes almost every man for himself. So, well, what am I going to get? Not what's my country going to get out of this? Yeah. What am I going to get out of this? But if you live close to the people, and are even an elected official, but you're close to the people like a mayor or a councilman, you know what's going on. You live among the people, and you open your arms to anybody that's willing to help.
Let me shift gears here a little bit, Karl. Over the past few months, I've really been encouraged as the issue of human trafficking has received more and more press locally, nationally as well. However, I know World Hope was talking and educating people on this issue long before the U.S. was waking up to this nightmare or acknowledging it. As a matter of fact, I'd say World Hope has been one of those agencies that's helped to kind of wake us up. Talk to us a little bit about human trafficking and World Hope's enduring commitment to that issue.
Sure, and you're right. Dr. Joanne Lyon got on board with when she began to discover what was happening in countries like Cambodia and Hong Kong and in different parts of Africa. And then so when George W. Bush, when his administration began to shed light on this, and he was really the first administration to begin to address the seriousness of the issue around the world.
Yeah.
And it's ugly. You take the lid off this thing, it's not pretty. It's just an ugly mess. And no wonder that we might want to keep our heads in the sand about it, because it's hard to look at and hard to imagine how evil people can be. And so Joanne Lyon was one of the early ones calling for the government to pay attention to this. So because of that, when you speak up, you get selected for committees. So she was placed on some government committees to look at some of this and what to do, and she was invited to the White House a few times to speak into the issue. So World Hope has been there, you're right, since the beginning years of when this came to light. 12.7 million people right now are sexual slaves somewhere in the world. That is, that they are not free to leave their dwelling or their brothel, or they've been kidnapped. They're not free to leave. Their passports are taken from them. And by the way, there's several 100,000 here in the United States.
Yeah.
Talk to the FBI. Washington, D.C. has a big problem where I live. Has a big problem with the issue right now here. So it's not something that's in Croatia or Moldova or Cambodia only. It's definitely here in the United States.
I know that on our show over the last 2 years now, one of the things that we have highlighted when it comes time for the Super Bowl is that there are literally scores and scores of women that are brought into the city that's hosting the Super Bowl just for sexual exploitation.
We saw it down in Florida, then we saw it this past year in Dallas, and next year in Indianapolis. World Hope is going to be at the Indianapolis venue.
Wow.
Nice.
We want to come in, and we're going to be doing some of the training as to what to look for, because it's not just a police force. In fact, the police force in these cities are asking for the local population to look out in their neighborhoods, and there are some telltale signs of what you can see, and they're saying, report them. It might not be anything, but you never know. And it takes citizens to stand up and say something unsavory looks like it's happening in this house. Cars coming all hours of the night, things like that. It could be a drug house, or it could very well be a house being used for human trafficking.
Well, I'm just so encouraged that World Hope has been out on the front of this, and they continue to bring this issue to light. I know that what we're beginning to see here and on our district is that human trafficking is becoming more of an upfront issue in our local churches, where time is being spent on it, videos are being shown, and the more the better. And I think that this, now, I'm a Wesleyan, and so I think for me, I just see us with this issue getting right back to the very heart of Wesley. Amen. And this idea of holiness and how it impacts the culture and society around us.
Today's world, in my opinion, is almost begging for the John Wesley type of approach.
Yes.
Methodism and the Wesleyan Church and the Free Methodist and Church of the Nazarene, these are denominations. Your day is now.
Yeah.
I mean, if you ever had a message for the day, it is here now. I mean, stand up. Don't be timid about this, because if not, much of the world, even the secular world, is going to blow right past us. I mean, the concern that's happening in the secular world with human trafficking is just begging for a Christian voice into all that. And I'm glad to see. In Cambodia, we have 2 assessment centers there, in the capital city and then in Siem Reap. And what happens is that International Justice Mission works with the local police force. They do the raids into the brothels. They bring the girls to the police station where our vans are waiting, and they put these under 15-year-old girls into our vans, and then we take them to these safe houses where they spend a couple of months being triaged by World Hope, and then we, after that, place them into longer-term care. But I've been to our 2 assessment centers. I've seen these girls. I've seen an 8-year-old girl in one of our assessment centers who for 2 years was locked up in a brothel 10 times a day, being used by dirty men. And what has to happen to just debrief them and get them cleaned up and get them thinking that God doesn't hate them, but he loves, just imagine the work that has to be done with these young girls. And so I'm very grateful for churches and Christians that help to sponsor these safe houses so that we can keep this work going. But it's tragic.
Dr. Eastlack, can you tell us, I don't know if you know this off the top of your head, but how many countries is World Hope in? Because to me, it's one of the things that makes me proud to be a Wesleyan is some of the work that World Hope's doing all around the world, because it has been a great way to get relief, but also to get the gospel into countries that otherwise would not allow it. And so, how off the top of your head, how many countries are we in right now?
We're in 18 countries around the world, including some former Eastern European countries. We're in some Muslim, predominantly Muslim countries, Asia, Africa, and in the Caribbean. We do a little bit of work in Central America also, not as much as what we used to, but we're a little bit in Central America and Guatemala.
I know that when Joanne was there, that the organization was able to make inroads into the Washington scene, the political scene there, which can be very important and can be helpful on relief efforts and moving things along. Is that the relationship still there?
To a degree. Not. I don't want to be too critical here, but the arms were more widely open with the George Bush administration than it is with the Obama administration. Faith-based organizations are finding it much more difficult to engage the Obama administration. Kind of ironic, but the faith-based community doesn't feel especially welcome these days. And there are several of us CEOs that have met with their administration to say, what gives? I mean, what do you, and one of his campaign promises was to return to the pre-George Bush days of faith-based organizations not getting federal funding. And George W. Bush opened that up to faith-based organizations with a lot of guidelines, and we've observed and followed those guidelines very specifically. But Obama had promised that he was going to remove that, and he hasn't done it. To his credit, he hasn't done it yet. Now he's got some liberals upset at him for that. But so we've had a little struggle. But I'm down on Capitol Hill. I meet with congressional staff. I have been at the White House a couple of times for briefings and things like that. But you're right. Even government is not the answer. And in fact, some organizations got a little dangerous during the Bush era, where they started to collect so much money from government that maybe 50 or 60% of their budget is now government funding. But you're very limited in how you can use it. You can't talk about God. You can't do spiritual things with that money. So World Hope has a standard that we want 20% or less of any work that we do would be driven by government funding, USAID and things like that. And but in Haiti, it was a great partner. USAID was a great partner with World Hope in Haiti. We were very, very fortunate that they found favor with us. And we had a $9 million contract over the last 4 years down there with USAID to work in HIV/AIDS clinics, testing, and also to be able to educate people on HIV/AIDS. And so we were very honored to work with villages on behalf of the government there.
I know that one of the things that I've observed in pastoring and over the years, and I think a trap that I kind of fell into early on in my ministry, is I began to kind of buy into this idea that our hope is in the political system, and for Christians, that is, it's just an awful way to approach this. Our hope is in the gospel. Our hope is in Jesus Christ, not in the political system.
That's nice when the political system gives a little freedom and all of that, but never rely, never put your eggs in that basket, because it's one that will always bite you to some degree.
Yeah. Well, we sure appreciate your time with us this morning. Once again, could you tell our listeners how they could get in contact with World Hope and contribute and get involved?
Yeah, folks, if you want to know just about our work, it's worldhope.org. If you want to donate, it's worldhope.org. You can go right online and make your donations that way. And I will say that I know you have a lot of options, a lot of places and a lot of very good and worthy organizations, and we would be honored to be on that list of organizations you would consider helping to support in the work that we're doing in these 18 countries.
You guys also do a really good job on the social networking scene.
Yes.
As far as Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that, and
One
people
of the
can
best.
find you there. Yeah, you really do a good job. I was impressed when I was looking at your Facebook page yesterday there at World Hope, to just see how well and how often you guys update and put information out in front of people. So I'd encourage people to also take a look at it that way. And I think Heath is throwing up links in the chat room. We'll have links to all that in our show notes.
I
after
might
the
be
show
a
today.
grandpa, but I'm not an old man. How's
All
that?
right.
I twit.
Nice. All right. Well, Karl, you can hang with us here as long as time allows. We know that you have another media event sometime today, so whenever you need to drop out, you feel free to do that. Again, thank you so much. And
thanks, guys.
Yeah, and as issues arise, if we might have the freedom, I can contact your secretary, and we can do this again if we think there's something we can get the word out on.
Anytime, I'd love that.
All right.
Great.
Well, let's go ahead and move on here in the show to They Said It.
Read my lips.
I'm going to say this again.
I've never taken steroids or HGH.
I took the initiative in creating the internet.
The Macintosh, of all the machines I've ever seen, is the only one that meets that standard.
I'm not a crook.
If you know what you're doing here, slide out.
Most single moms are very poor, uneducated, can't get a job, and if it weren't for government assistance, their kids would be starving to death and never have health care. And that's the story that we're not seeing. And it's unfortunate that we glorify and glamorize the idea of out-of-wedlock children. Mike Huckabee commenting on his concern that Natalie Portman's pregnancy glamorizes single motherhood. Source, AOL News.
Success is always dangerous, and we need to be alert and avoid becoming the victims of our own success. Will we influence the world for Christ, or will the world influence us? Billy Graham on the evangelical resurgence over the last half-century. Source, Christianity Today.
We're always going to be looking at what's the best way to contest the championship. 68 is certainly a start, and where it goes from here is anyone's guess. Greg Shaheen, NCAA Vice President, talking about the future of the NCAA basketball tournament. Source, Associated Press.
To me, this one thing, physical culture and nutrition, is the salvation of America. Billy Graham is for the hereafter. I'm for the here and now. Jack LaLanne, fitness guru who died in January at age 96. Source, the New York Times.
All right, I want to jump in on this very first one. So I think a lot of us have been listening to all the flack that Mike Huckabee has been catching for his comment about Natalie Portman's pregnancy, out-of-wedlock pregnancy. And one of the criticisms has been, well, you know, if he was so concerned about this, why didn't he say something when Sarah Palin's daughter, you know, when she was pregnant out of wedlock, he didn't say anything then, but, you know, maybe it's politically expedient that he says something now.
Well, here's the difference in that. When Bristol Palin got pregnant out of wedlock, she was demonized in the press. Her mother was demonized. When Natalie Portman receives the Oscar and, you know, she's pregnant or whatever, it's almost like it's a non-issue.
Well, and it came about as a result of an interview. Somebody asked him the question, what do you think about these things? So it wasn't that he decided, well, he sees Natalie Portman now expectant and comes out with a statement to the nearest microphone. Right. This is not a Jesse moment. Yeah. This is, you know, somebody asking him, put him on the spot.
And here's the thing, too. Natalie Portman, to my knowledge, has never claimed Christian values, has never claimed Jewish. To say that she was against what she's. I don't even know how to put it into words, but you guys know what I mean. Whereas the Palins, very strong Christian family, very vocal about that, and so I do think in the media that may be. I think there's a little bias, but I also think you got one who took a stand against that and one who didn't really take a stand.
I'm not on Sarah Palin's list of fans. I mean, she says some good things. I'm not against her by any means, but I mean, that's not the person I think I would vote for.
Right.
However, when her daughter was expectant, she came out and said, our hearts are broken with this. There was no need to come out and say that we're identifying this. Look, Don Miller, in his Blue Like Jazz, he identifies this. This is something every thinking Christian understands is detrimental to society and injurious to the child because they grow up without the loving and nurture of a family.
One of the things that I did is I did a document, and we'll post the document on our website. But I just gathered 4 or 5 studies that just talked about single-parent homes and what these kids face in single-parent homes. And my fear is that we're going to lose the message here. Yes. And on the message, Huckabee is dead on. He's right. But secondly, for the Church of Jesus Christ, there is a challenge here for us.
Oh, my goodness, yes.
And that is that if we want to have ministries that matter in the lives of children a decade, 2 decades from now, the time to get involved in their lives are now.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's just an opportunity waiting for the church.
I was talking with a couple the other day. They're both going through divorce. They're living together. She just became pregnant, and was just talking with them about the church. They were asking me where my church was, and they said, well, we used to go to this church, but they judged us, and they were talking about us behind our back. And, well, the Bible says not to judge, and the Bible says not to judge people. And I said, well, you're correct. The Bible says not to judge, but it says don't judge. You will be judged as harshly as you judge others. What I wish I would have said, and this is the fine balance, is what I wish I would have said is, the Bible says not to judge people, but it also says not to sleep with anybody that's not your wife. So there's a fine balance of, I was trying to show grace in that situation. I'm trying to show Christ, but then there's that flip side to say, what you did was wrong. I mean, there was no debate with. They knew what they did was wrong.
Difficult to get the right nuance, though, isn't it? As a pastor, when you're
especially
talking
in the setting
to people.
we were in, it wasn't. a good place for a soapbox that day. So
we're not into shame and
Right.
blame.
Right.
We're into hope and redemption, and yet you can't have hope and redemption if you don't chart what that looks like.
yeah.
Somehow that has to come
I've
across.
told my story before. I mean, my mom today, I'm very proud of my mom and just how her commitment to Christ, how she really has her act together and has had it together for a number of years now. And so, again, just great admiration for my mom. Now, having said that, at one point, my mom was a single parent with 5 kids, and I could just tell you nightmarish stories all day long. And my concern is that in this story, I've watched the press take this, and so Mike Huckabee has been the focus of this. And the message has been lost because what he has to say is sound. What he has to say is sound. And a culture that glamorizes that is going to be a culture that's constantly struggling. It's not going to provide a base for children. Hey, these other stories here, anything grab you?
On to the NCAA tournament.
I figured you would.
If people will go on our website, they can follow us on. They can follow us on Twitter. They can join our Facebook page, and on both of those, I'll be posting a link to the official Techology Show bracket. So that's going to be up as soon as the show's over. That link will be out. Come join us. It is the only user antagonistic bracket challenge in the world. And go Tigers to the first round.
Hopefully make the tournament, right? Yeah.
Hey, at least we're not in the Clemson Invitational, the play-in game to the ACC tournament.
Steve or Heath, you asked before when we were going over the show notes. You were wondering if maybe Jack LaLanne's comment there was kind of antagonistic or going after Billy Graham, and he wasn't. For those that may not know who Jack LaLanne was, he was a fitness guru. And
little short guy, too, wasn't he?
Yeah, and I mean, as a kid, I grew up, I remember my mom watching his afternoon show and exercising with Jack LaLanne. I guess he's more known for the juicer now?
Yes, which I have, and I'm actually going to post the link to my review.
That's the juicer. I love it.
It was a gift.
I was pastoring in the Church of the Nazarene in Central Florida, and he came to Orlando, and the chairman of the Board of Trustees and I went because he wanted to get a juicer. And I tell you, the whole show was a show. He was very entertaining. And, of course, he looked at whatever age he was then, about 20 years ago, 70-something. He looked 5 times better than I looked. I was in my 30s. So I had quite a bit of internal conflict over it. But I don't know how much of that was his genetic code. I know that he did exercise. But I would say this about him. In his speech, you could tell he was not a theologian, and he wasn't deep into religious things, but he had a respect for God and a love for people that came across, even in that setting, and I appreciated that. I really did. I was sorry to see that he had passed on.
Well, you talk about a guy that stayed on message his whole life. I mean, he just, he was one trick pony, and he stuck with it. How about Billy Graham's comment there?
About success?
Yeah, it's just a good common sense.
We have become, in many ways, victims of our own success because once you strike something that works well, say the Gaither music, and I like Gaither, Homecoming, I'm an old guy, but how many churches are stuck in the Gaither music, and there's nothing wrong with the Gaither music, but they couldn't even think about moving on to something else that might connect just as deeply with a contemporary congregation.
We have to remove you from this show for your liberal thoughts and leanings, Steve.
I think,
send your flaming darts to.
You look at every successful business and church, you're constantly reinventing your method. You're not reinventing your message, but you're reinventing your method as to how to present the gospel. And the churches that don't do that, they close their doors.
Yeah, contentment will kill. I mean, this has been you've talked about this a lot of times with the Apple Corporation. I mean, love them, hate them, they are constantly reinventing themselves.
Yeah, well, they're constantly trying to future cast themselves as well.
They're seductive, is what they are.
They're trying to see. They're trying not to see how well they can compete in the market that they're in.
Yes,
they're trying to see how well they can compete in the market of tomorrow.
Very good.
I'm coming out of the closet this morning.
Yes,
yeah.
can we
I was just going to say,
now?
this is going to lead to Steve's surprise announcement. Go ahead, Steve. Tell them what you got.
I am the proud owner of an iPhone 4.
There it is. Steve has got an iPhone.
I don't know
Mr.
whether
Anti-Apple.
I don't know whether to celebrate or to call heretic.
I was afraid you would pass out, Matthew.
Nosebleed.
Steven Sheets is going to be so disappointed that you have Apple
well,
product
I've
now.
rationalized this on the basis.
He's in the chat room. I'm turning this off right now.
Wait a minute, Steven. I have rationalized this on the same basis that we have World Hope. This is my attempt to outreach to this younger generation and somehow stay connected.
Now, let's be just very upfront and honest here, okay?
Yeah.
I just want to hear your experience. Now, I realize there's probably a big transition for you from a hard keyboard to a software keyboard, but how are you doing, and what do you think? I mean, just get as far as user experience, as far as
I'm fairly
so
impressed
far.
with it. I am fairly impressed with it. I'm having some adjustment problems between the old BlackBerry that I had. And
that doesn't surprise me. Would you say one of the biggest problems is the keyboard?
Yes, the lack of a keyboard.
Everybody will say that. Give it a little bit of time, and you'll customize yourself to that.
But I fat finger that little virtual keyboard.
The virtual keyboard will also learn as you type. Like it'll learn what you're trying to do with your fingers.
Well, let me also tell you, somebody wrote something nice about a baby, and I replied, AWWWWW, and it changed it to an unmentionable. I sent that off, and then I looked down, not knowing that it was correct, and I wrote back and I said no.
When I sent out I also got the
look at there,
Heath.
My goodness!
Yes,
and I got
all four of us now.
It is time to say the iPhone 4 is the official telephone of the Techology.
This is why I say they're seductive.
What?
But when I did my first tweet from my iPhone, Steven said, "We're no longer friends." Now, let me say this, and I had 3 different BlackBerries, so I've been a smartphone guy really since they first came out. And every smartphone I've ever had,
you've been a smartphone guy or a smartphone guy?
Both. But when I had the BlackBerries, it was like my thinking was always, what can this phone do?
Can we ask Dr. Eastlack what he has with that?
Yes, Dr. Eastlack, what is your personal preference?
BlackBerry.
Hey, now let's be honest.
BlackBerry guy.
That is a true world phone, though. I mean, that I guarantee you.
But
show them your candlestick phone now.
But with the phones before, it was like, what can this phone do? And now it's like, what can I do with this phone? I mean, it has been. I have zero. I mean, I'm a weekend zero complaints. It has exceeded. You guys know I waited with
what an evangelist. What an evangelist. Look how passionate he is.
Well, let me tell you what, as a pastor, I appreciate about this. Not only can you integrate your calendar and your contact list and all the rest of it, and you have access to email, you have access to basic word processing if you want to write something. But Logos Software, their app for this is incredible. I have something in the neighborhood of 4,500 books. I have access to all of them, Greek, Hebrew. I can sit in a emergency room waiting area and be working on Sunday's sermon while I'm waiting for information to come down. It's just incredible.
It's like having a hip top computer instead of a laptop computer.
If I can get over the fat fingering,
I guarantee you, though, that one of the biggest things why Heath here is saying, well, the transition wasn't difficult, and why you're saying it is a little bit more difficult, is because you're coming from a BlackBerry Storm that also had a virtual keyboard. So it's something that your brain has already processed.
So you're saying I'm slow? Is this a nice way of saying I'm slow?
It took a long time for me too. It will take some time. It'll take some time.
Steven, Steven is saying in the chat room that the Logos software is being blocked next month on iOS.
I think Steven is just.
He's messing.
We have a false prophet among us.
False prophet. All right.
Well, that was the surprise, and to all those who are out there slitting their wrists because you're loyal BlackBerry.
Now, I will say
I
this.
apologize.
What will you say?
You know, obviously the iPhone is designed to help your productivity, and to do that, do not, under any circumstances, download
Angry Bird.
Heath, do you know anyone that's done that on their phone? I mean, personally, do you know
I
anyone?
even bought the Eagle.
Oh, no.
What are you doing?
What? There was
Heath.
one level I couldn't get
What are
past.
you doing?
So I've got $2. I am on the third level. I'm going to beat it. I will defeat the angry.
You're
pig.
moving. This is a new definition of Christian perfection. Buy the Eagle, get to the third level.
That's right.
All right, let's go on to our last story. Good news, guys. Good
Yes.
news. Good news. Charlie Sheen is taking applications for a social media intern.
Me. Oh,
Yeah.
me, right here. Please.
Winning.
Oh, gracious.
Winning.
What happened to this
guy?
have we been observing over the past week and a half? I have not, I didn't
It's
spend
sad,
any
really.
time
No, it
on
is.
Charlie Sheen until
Yeah, thank you.
yesterday. I spent a little bit of time watching part of an interview, and it is just like a complete meltdown.
It's sad, as
Yeah.
Steve said. It's sad, and this is what I call the downside of media.
Yeah.
This isn't good media. This isn't. I mean, it's voyeuristic in terms of, again, someone who's just melting down. I have seen all of about 2 minutes, and I saw all I want to see. And I'm sad that we're so fixated on this. And there's almost like a cheering section. And I liken it to a cheering section for a train wreck.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, he needs someone that can step in.
Suicide.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Very
Right.
good.
Jump.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That.
And what would we do as a church if we could sit down with Charlie Sheen? What would our conversation be? He's obviously allowing his drugs and his addictions to talk to him, do his thinking for. He believes what he's saying. There's conviction
very much so. He's
in
very
his
passionate
voice.
about what he's doing.
And for someone who's lost a family member, my sister, as you know, dying of a drug overdose, there's a point at which they trust the drug's voice more than they trust their own mother and father. And it's sad because when you reach that place, and let me just say this to churches too, to churches and to individual Christians, when we believe what we want to believe rather than hearing the truth, all the truth, especially that truth which contradicts and challenges our own positions and thinking, we're in a dangerous place. The Bible says that if we stop our ears from hearing the law, we forsake our own help. And I'm afraid that's where Charlie Sheen is today.
Well, here's the thing. This is the transition that I kind of see happening. Is Charlie Sheen got to this point because at some point he became God of his life.
Right.
And he became the center of his own universe. The transition now is he is wanting other people to make
to
him
jump into
the
that.
center
To buy in.
of their universe.
And they're doing it.
Oh, my goodness
59,000
gracious.
watched his little online presentation here the other night, and he has over 1 million.
2 million now.
Twitter followers,
yes.
really? We're up
He
to 2
went. He
million?
was over 1 million within 25 hours, and he's actually, you can make money once you accumulate so many followers. Organizations, or corporations, will pay you just to tweet a link to them, and he could make literally millions of dollars just tweeting, just sitting in his bedroom and tweeting to all his followers. But
It'll all go up his nose. Or
it is such a sad thing. I just want to say
apparently.
to Charlie Sheen, forget the curveball, give him the heater. That's what I want to say.
He is building his own case against ever getting custody of his kids.
Oh, my dear heavens.
And
goodness.
I'm reminded of James Taylor. His marriage to Carly Simon dissolved, and it was after his divorce to her. and he was on methadone, so he had transferred from one narcotic to a controlled substance that the government was divvying out basically, and he did not have custody of his kids, and he says that he got off methadone because he wanted to play a part in his kid's life.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope for Charlie Sheen that if nothing else can motivate him, because he does seem to want to have a relationship with his kids. Yeah. Maybe that might be the motivating factor.
But if he wants to have a relationship with his kids, he's not going to be able to have a commune. I mean,
no,
can I say the word concubine? I mean, that's really, he's got these two ladies living with him, and that's basically what they are. And
that's my point. He's building a case against ever having custody. I mean, look at the footage that it's out there now. Mm-hmm. So if I'm going to court, I'm a lawyer. Mm-hmm. And I'm against Charlie Sheen. I'm trying to make the argument that he is not a responsible parent. He's not fit to parent these kids. All I got to do is go to YouTube.
Yeah.
That's all I got to do.
Yeah.
All righty.
Oh, I want to say, though, before we leave the subject of the iPhone, that
we've already left it.
I have written and protested their decision to limit the software that uses the Manhattan Declaration, references that. So I am not being hypocritical here. I am being faithful to my ideals.
You're an insider now trying to change the company from within.
That's right. In much the same way as my Budweiser stock.
No.
That was a joke. For any
Send any emails to Pastor Steve.
That's fine.
All right. Let's remind you that next week our guest will be Ben T.G. He is with Campus Crusade for Christ. He goes to UNC Greensboro, and will talk to us about campus ministries. March the 30th, remember that Dr. Melinda Denton will be with us. She is part of this study. It was the largest study of its kind that looked at the religious life of American teenagers. There's been 3 waves of data because they followed teenagers all the way up to their mid-20s, followed them for a decade. That first wave produced the book Soul Searching, also a DVD of the same. And the last wave of that research has culminated in a book, A Faith of Their Own. And Melinda Denton is the lead author on that. She's going to be in studio that day. And that is also going to be our 100th episode. Yes. And so as a...
we that old?
What?
Weren't we 13 when we started this?
Time gets by, Steve.
I know.
Mm-hmm.
As just a way of celebrating that, we're going to give away that day the book, A Faith of Their Own. We're going to give away the DVD and also the book, Soul Searching, the Religious Life of American Teenagers. Pretty simple to get in on that drawing. All you have to do is contact us via email. That's the Techology Show at gmail.com. Let us know you want in on the drawing. We'll put your name in, and you'll be considered to win that prize package. All right, Heath, where can our listeners find you on the internet?
If they go to chaseyourlion.com, I have it updated in about a week. Just been busy, but from there they can find me on Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff. Don't forget, follow at Techology and like our Facebook page. Join that as a fan. You'll get the link to our bracket challenge, and we'll be giving away a prize for that as well. It won't be tickets to the Final Four next year, but we'll take care of you.
All right, iPhone Steve, where can they find you on the internet?
They can find me on my iPhone.
I hope there's a Twitter account that is Steve's iPhone. Wouldn't that be good?
Oh, Steve's iPhone.
What'd he say?
Steve's iPhone.
Thank you. We've not embraced the Borg that deeply yet. It'll probably be.
You're in the process of assimilation.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think you can find me at steve.stanley, facebook.com, steve.stanley, or stanley.steve. One of those will get it.
You can find him somewhere.
I'm on the intranet.
He'll be standing there waving. Just look for the big bearded guy that's waving you down. You'll see him out there on the information superhighway. You can find me at Diary of a Young Pastor, DOAYP.com. I just got to say before we go, he had to cut out for his other stuff. But Dr. Eastlack, thank you so much for your time on this show. Great guest, great guy to talk with, great guy to interview, and I'm excited. I really just appreciate you and your work, so thank you.
Yeah, and let me say to our listeners, we post this show in about 2 hours. It'll be posted, and people can view it. You could do us a favor by encouraging friends and family members. If you enjoyed the podcast today, would you please let them know? and just spread the word about our show. We have been blessed. We've been able to get good guests. We're going to continue to push that in the future. And again, if like next week, if campus ministry is something that you're interested in, we've got Ben T.G. who's going to speak to us about that. If you are in youth ministry, March the 30th, we have Dr. Melinda Denton also bringing in a couple other guests for that show. And the whole thing is going to be on youth ministry. And so get the word out for us, and we would really appreciate it.
Yeah.
You can find me at facebook.com/AKC64. If you want to do further research on anything we discussed today, you can find all the links to the stories we covered at our website, thetechologyshow.com. If you want to contact us, send your emails to thetechologyshow@gmail.com or leave us your voicemail by calling us at 3049-TEOLOGY. 3049-TEOLOGY. That's 304-986-5649. Leave us a message and we'll play your comments on the air. Again, if you want to be considered for the March 30th 100th episode drawing, send us an email at the Techology Show at gmail.com. And if you have any comments you want us to read on the air, include that in the email as well. Again, as always, we appreciate your listening. Thanks for joining us. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Adios.